Hi, everyone. I'm just going to wait a couple more seconds before we get started. This webinar is being recorded. It's going to be available on our website at ctccim.com on the event page. You will be able to find the recording link and also access to the slide deck. My name is Jennifer Lynn. I am the 2026 Connecticut Chapter President for CCIM. We are joined today by myself, Mike Goman, who's going to be presenting this incredible webinar, What's Next in Commercial Real Estate, the 2026 Market Forecast. We're also joined by our chapter administrator, Bernadette Blaze, and our chapter secretary, Brandon Rush. If at any point during the webinar you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And at the last 10 minutes, Brandon's going to help moderate those questions with Mike. Perfect. Hey, everyone. Okay, I'm just seeing our logo, Bernadette. I'm not seeing the slides. Oh, there we go. Great, thank you. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank our annual sponsors. Without support from our industry partners, programming like today would not be possible. If you can, please go over to our website, find links to our sponsors, and be sure to visit them, see how they can partner with you on your success. We are very grateful to Northwest Community Bank, Community Investment Corporation, Ascend Bank, BL Companies, Cohn Resnick, and H. Kulik and Son. We have a super big thank you today to Attorney Michael Trella from the Talcott Law Group. I had the very good fortune of meeting Attorney Trella on a very complicated transaction this past year where he actually represented the other party. And he was so knowledgeable, so ethical, so thorough, and so fully available that we were really able to effortlessly navigate these hurdles that could have very easily derailed our deal. And we successfully crossed the finish line. All parties felt that they were served well. And I really credit Attorney Trella with that success. He's very funny, he's very kind, and he is a tremendous asset. So please take time to reach out to him and see how he can partner with you on any of your transactions. He's fantastic. At the Connecticut chapter of the CCIM, we are really working on educating the future. We serve as a focal point for quality education, networking, real estate marketing services for the commercial real estate professionals in our state. We take this mission very seriously, and we're always working to improve and to grow. So if that mission interests you or speaks to you, we would love to welcome you into the fold. Please consider getting involved in the chapter, on any of our committees, part of the leadership panel. We would really love to have you. We have a super packed calendar coming up for 2026. We'll just highlight a couple of our early spring events, but make sure to check our website to see what's up and coming. On February 11th, we're very proud to be hosting a commercial continuing education day. This is really great because the Connecticut chapter is back as an accredited school. So we're being able to offer things that we haven't offered in quite a while. And interestingly enough, this year, the mandatory class has to be taken in person. So we're offering on February 11th at the Cinto Auditorium in Shelton a full day of continuing education. The mandatory is being offered at 9:30 in the morning with Connecticut real estate license law. And at 1:30, we have Introduction to Real Estate Investment Analysis. You can earn up to 6 credits, which you're going to need. So please scan that QR code or visit our website, give us a call, and get registered for the event. We still have some spots available. $25 a class. Another fabulous event that we have coming up is this AI workshop webinar that's being offered on March 4th. Craig Grant is an expert in AI. And what's really incredible about this event is it's going to be offering you real-time tools that you could integrate into your business to help be successful right out of the gate. So definitely join us for that. We'll be sending out more details on that event soon, and we'll get you registered. Also in March, the 23rd to the 26th, we're offering an Institute core curriculum class, CI 101, Financial Analysis for the Commercial Investment Real Estate. That class is a 4-day class. It's the foundation of the designation program, and it's really, really an excellent class. Even if you're not in pursuit of the PIN, it breaks down investment analysis, and it's really, really a wonderful tool that is going to be partnered up with the Deals and Drinks event. And we're going to have a bunch of deals and drinks throughout the year. And then the Institute is hosting their spring forum in April. And what's great about this is that it's being offered in Philadelphia. So it's just a quick trip over, and you can participate in the education seminars and all that the Institute has to offer. The forums are usually really fun, and it's a great opportunity to get involved, see what people are doing throughout the country, and market yourself. It's a wonderful opportunity. Fall forum is going to be in Las Vegas. And then I don't think they said where the Global Summit's going to be yet, so keep an eye out for that. And before we get started, I'd like to just say a little bit about our host. Mike Goman is a principal at Goman in York. He has more than 40 years of experience in the real estate industry. He advises municipalities, tenants, corporations, institutional investors, and high net worth individuals regarding commercial real estate investment, acquisition, and development. Mike also serves as the president of AccuBranch, a provider of real estate market research, strategic network planning, and branch program implementation service to regional and community banks. He's a licensed real estate broker in 5 states, certified leasing specialist, certified retail property executive by ICSC, and he was named 2021 Realtor of the Year by the Greater Hartford Association of Realtors. We are so lucky to have Mike. He's been so gracious. This is like our best event of January. He kicks the year off for us. He's done it many years in a row. We're very grateful. So Mike, I'm going to pass the baton over to you. I don't know if at the end of this we're going to be celebrating or crying, but let's see what's in the forecast.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you again. As was mentioned, I think this is maybe the 5th year, I think, that we've done this together, and I'm glad to be with you again. So I've got a presentation. Many of you, if you sat through this in previous January events, you'll see some similar formats, but basically what I'd like to do is spend the next 45 or so minutes and go through some data and our take on the market and some forecast comments. And then I look forward to your questions in the last 10 or so minutes. So as Jennifer said at the top of the discussion, please go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll get to them as many as we can. So anyway, good afternoon. Glad to be with you again. Let me see if we can go. So this Jennifer introduced me. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think I'm actually up to 7 states now. Jennifer, I'll have to send you that update.
Thank
we're
you.
on a licensed broker.
Yes, thank you.
That's good and bad. I mean, it's great for business, but you can imagine how much CE I have to do every year. It just seems like I'm doing 100 hours of CE a year just to keep up with the various licenses. So as Jennifer mentioned, we do a lot of work for a variety of different clients. Our work is really focused on economic development and project analysis. These are some of the organizations that we do work with. In recent years, we've expanded sort of west. We were in Texas for quite a while, but we've added Arizona and a strong presence in Florida now as well. And we are now members of the Southern Economic Development Council, and I recently joined the Public Policy Committee. And I've spent a lot of time, as many of you who know me know, I spent a lot of time working across the South, so it's an area that I'm very familiar with, but it's interesting on a day-to-day basis to be really engaged in what's going on in some of these Southern growth markets, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along here. My experience covers all these states and Canada. I grew up in Canada and started out in the early 80s working on projects across Canada. So my experience spans all of the Canadian provinces, and then you can see the states. There's a few that I didn't get to, but a lot of experience. And it spans all of the sectors, whether it's retail or hotel or industrial or multifamily or office. So quite a bit of everything, actually. Our clients, as Jennifer mentioned, I guess I've grouped them into three groups. One is developers. And for that group, we're doing market and financial feasibility and fiscal and economic impact studies, and then helping with the land use approval application process. That's maybe 20 or 25% of our business. And typically those projects start at around 30 million and go up from there. The second client group is what we call our institutional client group, and that's universities and hospital systems and state and quasi-state agencies. Could be not-for-profits, including things like churches and the YMCA and so on. But basically, the way we describe that group is they're organizations that own or control a lot of real estate, but they're not real estate people. One of our largest clients in Connecticut is the Connecticut DOT railway system. They own about a little over 3,000 pieces of real estate. It's the highest volume passenger rail system in the U.S. And they're railway people, but they're not real estate people. So we've been working with them now 6 or 7 years, I guess, and I think our current contract would go out another 3 years or so. But that'll go on, I think, probably interminably. But again, these are groups that own or control a lot of real estate, but they're not real estate people. And then the third client group is municipalities. And in Connecticut, I think Connecticut, Massachusetts, and that region, we're probably somewhere around 30 municipalities total around the country, mid 40s, closing in on 50 municipal clients. I'm actually in Florida today for a meeting right after this session with one of our municipal clients in Florida. So those are the three client groups: developers, institutional owners, and municipal clients. For municipalities, our work is really focused on economic development, strategic planning, and things like regulatory reform, zoning updates, and plans of conservation development, and so on. So, we are not developers in our own right. We don't take participations in any of the work that we do. We have to have clean hands, so to speak. So we are always an advisor, fee for service advisor, just like you'd hire an architect or an attorney. And we've been doing this since 2011, so we're now, I guess, in our 15th or 16th year, something like that. Anyway, that's who we are. Interesting work. These are projects that we work on, large, complicated ones. The largest one we're working on right now is about 550 million. It's a defense contractor who wants to build a new facility in a community that we work with. Stalled and failed projects, a lot of that going on. Projects that just something went wrong, and we'll be asked to have a look at it and see if we can fix it. We're seeing more work in the eminent domain again, where it's driven by obsolescence, blight, or desire for increased economic activity. And this is mostly driven, of course, by communities that are looking at specific properties that they'd like to see redeveloped. And then on the public planning and land use side, we tend to be on when there's contentious issues going on. So a lot of clients, something that says 250 municipalities. I think we're actually well over 300 now. That's a little bit out of date, but a lot of work. So let's get into the material here. I know this is what you're here for. This looks a little familiar to the first slide from last year's session. A lot of headwinds still. We have, bounced back out of the post-COVID issues, and we saw a real peak in activity, 22, 23. And now we're sort of settling back into a bit of a period of stability. No secret to anybody here in this call about office space utilization declining as a result of remote working, the impact of interest rates doubling in the retail sector, significant declines in mall traffic, regional mall traffic. We've certainly seen that in Connecticut. Return of inflation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the session today. Tightening of investing criteria and lender requirements. Building materials became scarce in some cases and very expensive in a number of additional cases. We're now starting to see the impact of tariffs. And of course, we've been sort of in this period of, I'm not sure it's a recessionary trough that we're still in right now. I think, we've been using the term sort of like an economic pause a little bit. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more. But the last 5 years have had all these headwinds. And, pleased to say that I think our industry responded well to dealing with them. We are an industry that works with our clients to present and implement solutions. And I think we can all be proud of the work that our organizations have done over the last few years as we've had to deal with this stuff. The current office vacancy nationwide is 20%. And you'll get a lot of, I'm sure you're all seeing different data points, but we have our own, preferred sources of data. The current national vacancy we're seeing is around at or plus or minus 20%. That compares to the average that we saw since the 1990s, around 12%. So a pretty significant increase, pardon me. No surprise to that. The Hartford region has done a little bit more poorly than that, if you want to call it that. The region, 22%. The central business district of Hartford, unfortunately, has a significant vacancy rate of around 35%. We have done a lot of analysis on that Hartford CBD issue, and you will probably see some of that work that we've done in the next couple of months. We've been working closely with the city and a few CRDA and DECD on analyzing that and sort of helping everybody think through what that means to Hartford long term. So stay tuned on that. You'll start to see some information in the next little while. However, we are seeing some leasing momentum in the office market around the country, not necessarily in our region so much as areas like Manhattan. Manhattan seems to have kind of roared back and represented almost 15% of the leasing volume in office in the previous year, 2025. Flight to quality, we've talked about that in previous sessions. Everybody wants to and can get into space in prime or Class A buildings. Rent spreads, we're still seeing around 10%. Allowances, TI allowances are continuing to be a factor, particularly in the B and C properties. In the upper right, you can see some data about absorption and asking rents, and these are all national data. Very little construction, new construction, basically none, of any significance. A lot of small stuff, but nothing of any size. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Big topic for us is, what do you do with all these old office buildings? So the discussion tends to center around converting them to some other use, typically residential. And we're just seeing an enormous amount of momentum building around this issue of conversions. Fortunately, again, I think our industry has done a good job of getting underneath what's going on, really starting to analyze these buildings, work with architectural design firms to come up with viable redesigns to convert these buildings. The big issue, the big challenge is the financial side. How do you make these conversions work? And quite frankly, I mean, the big issue there is that the current owner is probably going to take a huge haircut on the value of that building. So the buildings that were valued at $350 a square foot 10 years ago are being valued at $50 a square foot now. And we've got some serious examples of that in a lot of the markets that you're familiar with. So the basis has to be rationalized to what it takes to make these conversions work financially. And that means that's this big haircut that I mentioned. So we're going to see a lot more of that. Retail, steady, the US consumer, never count the US consumer out. You can see over here in COVID, there's that big dip. The peaks are the holiday season sales, but steady increase. This is what's called GAFO sales, general merchandise, apparel, furniture, and other. So it takes out automobiles and some of those kinds of items and really focuses on the sales that are germane to us. So again, don't count the U.S. consumer out by any means. They are resilient and they continue to come into the market and spend money. There is a flight to value, no question. I think everybody has seen that. But definitely the U.S. consumer is still active. We're going to come back to that in some of the forecasts. On the left is retail sales in total over a long period of time, 92 to 24. And you can see steady upward growth, steady growth in the market, except for that dip in the COVID period. On the right, though, is food and beverage sales. And same sort of trajectory, if you will, but look at the jump in the COVID period. I mean, where retail sales dropped significantly, people stopped spending money on hard goods. They actually started to spend more on food and beverage. So again, just further evidence that the U.S. consumer is still alive and well. E-commerce continues to be on everybody's mind. What's the long-term impact of that? I think probably this audience has a greater grasp of the components of e-commerce versus brick and mortar sales. But the reality is that e-commerce sort of grew to 16-17% of the retail sales, and then started to plateau. And in fact, it sort of declined a little bit. You can see in those years, sort of 2022, and it's recovered a little bit. The graphs, the bar graphs at the top, kind of show the breakdown between different brick and mortar and sales in different types of centers. But the point here is that a few years ago, everybody was saying, why will anybody go into a shopping center, get in their car and drive down to their shopping center if they can pick up their phone and order something off Amazon? And the reality is that the market continues to support brick and mortar retail in a big way. It's still well over 80% of retail sales. In fact, the youngest generations now are showing a pullback from online sales and a return to in-person, in-store, brick and mortar shopping. And the retail industry, the retail development industry, intended industry, I think has responded appropriately to that by making the stores more interesting and more the malls more interesting. Now, this is when we talk about malls, we're really talking about the Class A malls in the best markets. There are a lot of malls, roughly 1,820 of them across the U.S. that are in some level of distress. So, as usual, when you start talking about this kind of data, you really have to drill down into what's actually going on the ground. But the point is, brick and mortar retail is alive and well. And we're seeing a lot of brick and mortar retailers who are now, who have in the last few years, really strengthened their online presence and added things like buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, delivery, just like Amazon does. And, the interesting thing to me is we've never thought of Amazon as a retailer. We've really thought of Amazon as a logistics company. Tell us what you need and we'll deliver it to your house. But they've never really had the advertising and promotional and merchandising talents and skills that the successful retailers out there have had for years. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. You tend to see over this arc of time, you tend to see a merger between these concepts. And I think that's what's going on now. Amazon, for example, just opened up a 220,000, I think it is, a retail store. And as I think probably everyone knows, they bought Whole Foods. So they're suddenly becoming, or not suddenly, but in the last few years, they've become more of a brick and mortar retailer. Target, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's have become more of an online retailer. So we're seeing this merger in that, and that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But there's no question that retail real estate is still a good bet. As usual, it's always been an industry that sort of eats its young, if you will, and so it's constantly changing. And today's whatever the hot topic, well, I shouldn't pick that because that's actually a company name, but today's hot retailer is tomorrow's Radio Shack, and you just have to be aware of that and realize that's the way the retail industry works. But if you have well-located retail property, you should be in good shape and continue to see if you're aggressively and actively staying in touch with what's going on in the industry, your leasing will be successful. Still represents 2/3 of economic activity. The compound annual growth rate for the next number of years to 2030 is estimated to be over 3%. Holiday 25 was actually a pretty good year, better than 24, not quite as good as the post-COVID-19 peaks in 22 and 23, but about 4.2% up. Thanksgiving sales were record Thanksgiving sales. And so it's interesting. I mentioned this issue of the U.S. consumer. They're still out there and they're still buying. They may be trading down, but they're still going to these retail centers. E-commerce, we've talked enough about that. We'll see some growth in that. A lot of that growth will come from existing brick and mortar retailers who are expanding their presence in online. Consumer confidence, this is this discussion we're going to talk a little bit about in a little more detail, but consumer confidence is actually the lowest since 2014, lowest in more than 10 years. And yet retail sales are still there. If you talk to food and beverage people, when they talk about how the consumer behaves in their restaurant, they'll say something like, customers talk thin but eat fat. So they talk as if they want to eat healthy, but when they order things that aren't healthy. And I think this is sort of this interesting dynamic between consumer confidence being low, but spending continuing to be strong. Again, diving into the data is really important, and understanding what it's actually telling you is critical. I talked about A-malls, strip center retail doing well in many markets, historically low vacancies. This bifurcation on value, we see at income levels. The wealthy income level people are still spending at the high-end stores. The lower income cohorts have really gravitated towards the value pricing retailers. But overall, retail has rebounded quite well, and it's, I think, got a strong future ahead of it. Inflation certainly took a toll. As I said, customers gone towards value pricing in a lot of ways. Retail store closures continued to be high, but that's that transitional change as retail chains sort of peak their level of acceptance by the customer, and they end up being replaced by new retailers. That sort of activity is probably strongest in food and beverage retailers, where we're seeing, long established food and beverage chains that are really old news, and customers are not going there anymore. And they are being replaced by newer food and beverage chains that are growing like crazy. I'll pick on Chick-fil-A just because we see them everywhere. We've seen markets where Chick-fil-A has got 3 Chick-fil-A restaurants within 5 miles. We've seen highway exits with 2 Chick-fil-A's, and they're doing $8 to $10 million per store. So there's no question that there are winners and losers in that food and beverage category, but the sales continue to be strong. The net absorption is up, as you can see over on the right, but construction's down on a number of square feet basis, which is good. We're not seeing population growth the way we were a few years ago. So, new development of retail space has to be carefully considered. Food and beverage, we did see a lot of closings. With local and casual dining were hit the hardest. The value meals have really become popular as the pressure on pricing has increased. These guys are still dealing with the staffing shortages and increased costs and so on that we've been talking about. But a lot of growth in some of these national chains in the growth markets. Not all markets are seeing it, but a lot of the southern growth markets have seen strong growth. Construction industry, a lot of money still going into it. You can see it been a steady growth over the years, and we expect some moderation in that. But interestingly enough, if you look at the period when interest rates really doubled, construction spending continued to go up despite the cost increases and the interest rate increases. We are seeing some leveling off in spending in construction of manufacturing versus residential and non-residential. And you'll get these, as Jennifer pointed out, you'll get these slides. The slides will be available. But you can see that blue line down at the bottom is total spending on manufacturing-related facilities. And you can see how it bumped up. And that's an interesting sign. You can also see how then spending on non-residential, the green line, bumped up significantly. So, construction's still fairly strong. Connecticut isn't doing quite as well as the rest of the country is, but we don't have the same peaks and valleys as the rest of the country, but we have steady, typically we have steady growth. Single family is an interesting sector. A lot of talk about that. We'll talk a bit more about that as we get into this a little more. But the mortgage rates, we hear a lot of discussion about the mortgage rates being so high, in quotes. But when I started out in the industry in the early '80s, the interest rate was over 18%. The historic interest rate is around 7%, which is basically right about where we are now. So it's all a question of perspective, I guess. But the interest rates on home mortgages are, tied very closely right now to historic norms. And so I think, that's probably in the long run not a bad thing for the market. The free money period was great when interest rates were below 3, but that brings with it its own market distortions and issues. Single family residential, definitely increased demand, but a tight supply drives up prices. The discussion, by the way, about housing supply and that we've seen not only in Connecticut but in a lot of markets, and the affordability of it. I mean, the way to drive the price of something down is to build more of it. So this tight supply is the problem. And that we could spend a lot of time talking about what the reasons are for that tight supply, but there's no question that permitting and the regulatory environment have played a big role in that tight supply, particularly in markets like Connecticut. So one of the answers to bringing housing costs down is to allow more of it to be built. Simple supply and demand. The interest rates, 6.3 in the last quarter, and you can see some data over on the right in the bar graphs of the history since the 70s. It's kind of interesting to look at between the averages and the peaks of interest rates. This slide's got some information on Connecticut residential, but the summary is that the demand remains strong, inventory is limited, affordability is continuing to be a problem. But well-priced homes, homes that are priced at the market are definitely moving. Lots of activity still. The apartment market nationwide, the last couple of years have been record years in terms of the delivery of new apartment units. And the past couple of years, we'll see a slide here in a minute, but the past couple of years have seen delivery of a record number of units, but very high absorption rates as well. We are starting to see that change, and I'll show you that slide in a second. But the drivers have been job growth and population growth in certain markets, not all, but in certain markets. And the view that it's cheaper to rent now than it is to own. And also a preference by the some of the generations behind us that they don't want to be tied down to a house. They want to have the ability to relocate. They want to be free of the maintenance issues that come with home ownership and the cost of major repairs and so on. And a desire to live in so-called city life environments, more active, where they can walk to, experiential things, food and beverage uses that they like, sports and activities that they want access to. And certainly from a public policy standpoint, there's been a definite move in a lot of markets toward density and generating central business district activity. So we'll see more of those trends. Multifamily overall, you can see starts. These are all rental properties, and you can see the number of starts on the left-hand side versus the share of the total being built that represents rental properties. And again, you can really get a sense of how back in the 2004, 5, 6, there was much less demand for rental property. And now the demand for rental property is really, dominating the market. This chart, and again, you might want to spend some time with this, but this looks at floor area of the multifamily and the median floor area versus the average floor area over a period of time. And you can see how that's changed as units have gotten smaller. As I said a minute ago, the 30-somethings, the younger generations are really much more geared toward renting than owning. The line at the bottom of the page here, I guess that's kind of an orange. That's the oldest age cohort. The lines at the top are the younger cohorts. And so it gives you an idea of the share that want to own their home versus are happy renting. The absorption rates, again, we are seeing some decline in the absorption rates in recent months. We're starting to see concessions come into the market, rent concessions come into the market in apartments as well. Class C rents, and this the discussion here basically is, the new rental properties that are being built are highly amenitized, Class A, if you will. And in many markets, what that's causing is a relocation from people who are currently renting an older property, older kitchens, older bathrooms, and less amenities, and they're relocating to an amenitized property at greater rates. And that's leaving behind the C-level properties, which increases the vacancy and drives the rents down. And you can get an idea of some of the changes in the rents, but they're all negative in those C-class properties. We're certainly seeing that in the central Connecticut, north central Connecticut region. The tenants are the double income, no kids, single income, no kids, empty nesters, people who want to get out of their house but stay in the community that they're in. Again, we're now starting to see multifamily investors and owners prioritizing maintaining occupancy levels over rent growth. So they're using concessions as a way to do that. And we're starting to see more of that. Definitely absorption rates, lease up rates on newer properties have slowed down significantly in a number of markets. Some markets dramatically, Austin and Phoenix, have seen enormous slowdowns in the pace of absorption of multifamily properties. And that's partly due to a slowdown in the growth, population growth in those markets, but also partly due to the economic environment that we're in. The one thing that we talk about quite a bit is this issue of operating expense increases that are outpacing the revenue growth. So operating expenses jump 4.5%, 5%. Revenue growth is 2%. that's a problem, if that continues for any length of time. And a big chunk of that OpEx expense growth is being driven by local property taxes. And again, that's a topic we could talk about that's at some length, but that's definitely a huge factor. We do a lot of analytical work on proposed projects, and we're seeing projects where 3 or 4 months of the revenue, the rent, are going just to pay property taxes. We used to estimate that property taxes and operating expenses might take 30, sometimes 35% of the total revenue. That number is jumping significantly, and that's partly being driven in large part being driven by the increased valuations for tax purposes of a lot of these properties. So something to be paying attention to. Self-storage still active, slowed down a little bit in 25. They've gotten to be better. Some of them, the ones that we see in southern markets, they look like they're apartments or office buildings. So they're a little more acceptable. Warehouse and logistics properties, definitely the surge that we saw, driven mostly by changes in building configuration, automation, and so on, and driven by online retail. That's tapered off somewhat, and we've seen this deceleration in the new building starts, such that we're at the lowest level of new building starts in the last 10 years since 2014. But that may be short-lived. We are seeing changes that new entrants in e-commerce, and that's oftentimes existing brick and mortar retailers that are setting up facilities now as their online presence grows and they can't service the demand from their existing store base. Vacancy a little higher, Northeast slightly lower, just because we tend not to overbuild as much as some of these high growth markets get. But there is still very strong investor interest in solidly leased, recently built warehouse logistics properties, and we've seen a lot of transactions, a lot of buying and selling of those properties in the last few years. Data centers, hot topic. If you look at the data and you look at the amount of money being spent on data centers versus the total amount of CapEx investment in real estate, data centers right now are representing the vast majority of growth in real estate investment and new construction. The big issues with data centers are, how long are these things going to last? We talked to a guy recently who said he's happy to finance the construction of them, but he's not going to put a long-term loan on it. His comment was 5 to 7 years is their lifetime of these data centers, and that's because the computer technology that's inside them is changing so quickly, and it has to. If you're going to be competitive in that business, you have to change it to keep up. So there is this concern about how long will a given life cycle be for a data center, and are we building more of them than we need? There was a recent report out that said that we're probably building about 10 times the amount of data centers that will actually be needed. So there's a lot of debate going on that in that sector. And the big issues around developing them are the availability of utilities and then increasing public opposition to them. So let's talk a little bit about our predictions. The Gen Z and millennials are really a transformative group. They're a little more resourceful. They're learning how to stretch their dollars and their available money to get what they want. They're much more focused on how they spend their time. Teach me something, give me something to do with my friends. They're much more interested in that sort of experiential focus than they are on shopping in the way we used to see shoppers shop in the 1980s, where an afternoon in the mall was kind of a pleasurable way to spend a few hours, and shop in the stores. The Gen Z millennial group really don't have much interest in that. So they're much more driven by the sense of establishing a sense of community and the experience that they get while they're in a building. And we're going to see a lot of malls, and we're seeing it already. We're going to see a lot of malls really integrate uses that are non-merchandise driven, more experience driven into the malls that exist today. Some of the malls that exist today will essentially become more activity centers than they are, centers for shopping. So they'll have, again, we're seeing everything from indoor go-kart tracks to pickleball courts to, name an activity, climbing walls. They're converting these old malls into, including so that they include some of these uses or converting them entirely to that kind of use. Other influences, fiscal monetary policy, we definitely, the uncertainty we're seeing both internationally and nationally have changed the risk calculation. And we just have to stay closely monitoring that. And it's also become a much more global focus, at least for us. What's going on overseas. A few years ago, we could kind of ignore it. We really can't do that anymore. We have to think about what is happening overseas and how it might affect the U.S. economic activity. And then the impact of technology and analytics, we like to say things are moving at a faster pace. I think that's always been the case every time we think about this stuff. Things have gotten more complex. The impact, what will be the impact of AI is a hot topic among everybody that's in the business of investing capital in any form of investment. And certainly data is key. Understanding what the data is telling you is really key now. And the currency of that data, the data sources that we used to rely on a few years ago that we're really looking back, sometimes 6 months or a year previously, that data is just not helping us anymore. We need more current data. Unfortunately, there is more current data available, and you really have to parse through that, but it's key. And it holds an equal position now to when you're doing analysis for locations of commercial buildings, that an understanding of the data holds an equal place to the actual location that we talk about. Housing affordability, we're starting to see some changes in housing, certainly a focus on, can we build houses for less money, and everything from, tiny homes to small homes, and to ADUs, a lot more creativity being applied, much more of an inclination to work together between the public and private sectors. And I guess it's really a balancing act between, trying to find housing that can be utilized by lower income people versus the kind of housing that a lot of communities want to see. And if you're watching what's going on in Connecticut communities, there's a lot of tension over that. Pricing, again, lots of things going on between banks and private capital sources. Global influences are affecting pricing. Back to basics, the asset management always has been important to investment analysis, and in a world where OPEX growth is outpacing revenue growth, that asset management becomes key. And not just controlling expenses, but looking for other ways to grow income. And particularly in the hospitality sector, we're seeing more of that. Really having a deep understanding of the risks involved and doing a real thorough job of underwriting every deal that people are looking at. So inflation is sort of stabilized, but at a level around 3% or so, but it's not decreasing. The basic cost of goods and services has gone up, and that's a topic that we've heard a lot about. Income growth is certainly stalled. We're just not seeing the growth in earnings, hourly earnings. And of course, the impact of fiscal policy is going to have, continues to have an impact on real estate investment decisions. Just a quick look at some of the external economic challenges that CEOs are looking at, and this comes from the Conference Board data. So across the top is global, US, Europe, and Asia. And you can see there's a lot of alignment between these different geographic regions, CEOs in the different geographic regions, over what the issues and concerns are. There are some variances between, for example, how the Europeans are perceiving the impact of inflation versus US CEOs. But Interestingly enough, if you look down at the items that aren't getting as much focus, things like monetary policy and national deficits are down at the bottom, and food prices as well. So interesting just to see how the view is. This is another sort of look at CEO views of geopolitical and security risks. Given the amount of uncertainty, and again, you can see a lot of consensus around the concerns about cyber attacks and uncertainty and social and civil unrest right across the board. A lot of consensus around those issues. Social priorities. Again, the economic opportunity stays at the top, education, mental health, and so on. A lot of consensus around those kinds of issues. A little bit of variances in some of the social policy issues as you go down that list. Office, we're at the lowest construction levels in 30 years. We really have an oversupply of available office space, and we're now dealing with both market and functional obsolescence. As you've probably heard me say, when an office building gets to be 40 years old, 50 years old, it's not just a question of, gee, we need to lease up this building. It's a question of, boy, we've got a lot of CapEx to catch up on. For these buildings, these office buildings were never built to last longer than 50 or 60 years without major reinvestments. I like to say that there's a reason the IRS lets us depreciate buildings over 39 and a half years, and that's because depreciation is real. And as I mentioned at sort of the top of the discussion, converting some of these old office buildings is driven by the cost of the refurbishment, if you will, or almost rebuilding of some of these buildings such that you can convert them to residential uses. And when I say rebuilding, a lot of times when we look at these conversion ideas, the building itself, there's very little value to it other than the steel structure and the concrete deck between the floors. The building envelope, all of the fire, life safety, electric, elevators, HVAC, all that's 50 years old. It's all got to be replaced. And that's a daunting financial exercise to do that and make the numbers come out. So we are really dealing with this obsolescence issue. The Class A buildings, in order to stay leased up, there's a real move towards adding amenities, and that seems to be having a positive impact on absorption rates. In housing, single family and multifamily, this affordable struggle and the OPEX shortfalls I've mentioned, and the importance of government influences in terms of land use permitting and the impact of the increases in property taxes on the financial viability of these buildings. And of course, a lot of homelessness. There's a lot of focus on, ties into housing affordability, but a lot of focus on, what can we do to improve the levels of homelessness that we're seeing out there. Retail, consumer sentiment, we've talked about, and you've heard me say a couple of times, never count the U.S. customer out. The interesting thing for me is if you interview somebody and you ask them how they think the economy is doing, they'll often say, "Oh my gosh, costs have gone up. It's terrible. And by the way, I don't have time to talk to you because I need to catch my flight to Disney with my family." So, I spend a lot of time in airports, and it's always amazing to me how busy they are and how much traffic we're seeing in airports despite all this economic uncertainty. So again, never count the U.S. consumer out. Shoppertainment, that's that experiential addition that I've talked about in converting some of the retail mall properties, particularly that we need to add this component of, teach me something, give me something to do with my friends, etc. The other thing we'll watch this year in retail is this big, beautiful bill. The expectation is that we'll see record tax refunds this year. So among the retail worlds that we work with, we've seen a lot of focus on that. Industrial and manufacturing, labor costs, slowing consumer demand, impact of automation, tariffs, and so on are all factors, influences. You can see some of what I was supposed to add a quote. I added a quote later. Data centers, again, you've touched on this. We touched on life cycle and utilities, public opposition, and the potential for oversupply. So we're looking at that. When we look at projects, and we're going to dive into a little bit of what we're watching out there. When we look at projects, Starting with the developer, we're really looking at the developer's track record, financial capacity, and managerial capacity, which managerial capacity means, if they've got 3 properties under development now, can they handle a 4th? And a lot of these smaller developers that we find in some of the markets that we work in, that's a real issue. Track record is a huge issue. We are seeing relatively inexperienced developers coming into the market on projects. They're finding buildings that they can buy cheap, and they're chasing a dream that they can redevelop it and be a real estate developer. If we see a developer who's never done this before but is filing an application, that's usually a red flag for us when we're doing our work on behalf of our municipal clients particularly. We're going to need to see more creativity and new approaches to converting some of this obsolete real estate, and there's a lot of focus on that. But again, the thing that will drive that is declines in prices and making it accessible to people that see a strong market, good location, and they know how to repurpose a building and make it responsive to the market demand again. AI, big discussion. We see it as a tool that's just going to complement but not replace human labor. The interesting thing in the data that we look at now is the GDP growth is greater than the actual job growth, which is telling us that automation is having an effect on GDP, where GDP growth can be driven by automation and not by adding employees. So we're going to see more of that. Other things we're watching, uncertainty, both nationally and internationally. Fed moves this year. We're going to see some changes in leadership and the membership. People that are on the Fed, the current administrations made it clear they're going to change the membership of the Fed, and that'll change how they address some of these issues, primarily rates. We're expecting probably 2, maybe 3 reductions in rates during this year, and probably a 75 to 100 basis point reduction. Talk to people who think it's going to be bigger than that. We'll see. I think 75 to 100 is probably about where it ends up. Data analytics will just keep getting faster and better, and AI is going to enable people that haven't really been good at using data analytics to become much better at it. And a lot of focus on risk management and mitigation in this world. So let me just wrap up here and we'll go to some questions. We're running a little tight on time. Sorry for that. Powerful tool that AI is in terms of looking at data, but success is still going to involve people like you, people in our industry who are doing the on-the-ground analysis and thinking this thing through and applying their experience and their creativity and adaptivity to making projects work. And the closing comment here is my own comment about having spent almost 50 years in the industry now. It's interesting to see how easily we forget the lessons of history. I've lived through about 7 different slowdowns, economic slowdowns, recessions, whatever you want to call them. And historically, they always return to the norm. I think we're seeing that now. Despite all the uncertainty that's out there, it's still a strong industry. We've got to be responsive and reactive, but I'm confident that as an industry we'll do that. So thank you for listening. Brandon, happy to go to some questions.
All right, Mike, thank you. We have one question so far. If anybody else has questions, please type them into the chat. But from Matt regarding your multifamily section, says, is the jump in OpEx over 35%, is it local to CT or is it national?
It's national. We're definitely seeing that in every market to a greater or lesser degree. The cost of labor have gone up, the cost of materials related to OpEx has gone up, taxes have gone up. The interesting part about that is, when you look at a given market, we're always interested in seeing how much of the municipal or county or state budget comes from collecting property taxes. And that'll tell us a lot about what the impact will be on OpEx. But the thing to remember about property taxes, and it's always been known, it's a problematic tax because you're not taxing income. You're taxing basically the book value of an asset. So if you're a homeowner and your property, and we've seen this in markets, If you're a homeowner and your property taxes or your property value has gone up by 30%, you feel rich on the one hand. On the other hand, if your property taxes have also gone up 30%, I mean, even though you're being taxed more on it, you didn't get any income out of that. You're not any richer from a liquid standpoint. You're just paying more. So the issue of property tax impact on OPEX is a factor everywhere you go, but greater in those markets which are more reliant on property taxes than they are for sale on, or than they are, for example, on sales taxes.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Another one here from John Emmanuel. What is the outlook for CT flex use buildings in the 10K to 5K, 50K square foot range?
I would say it's modest. Meaning the projects that we've looked at, and I'm not, let's be clear, I guess if it's a 10 to 50K flex off or flex industrial space, but the intent is that it'll be divided up into 3 to 5 to 6,000 square foot spaces. There is very strong, across the markets that we work in, at least, there's very strong demand for spaces like that, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 square feet in a 50 or 60,000 square foot overall building, high bay, but small bay, industrial, flex industrial. Lots of demand for that. Small contractors, small companies, startups, and so on. And we think that's a very interesting sector. And I think it's going to be, we're going to see that continue to be an active part of the growth in a lot of the markets that we work in.
Got it. Thank you. We have another question here from Frank Amodio. Mike, what are your thoughts on creative solutions to lessen the impact of property insurance cost increases? Is large deductibles one of them?
Yeah, I think we've seen an increasing number of owners who have decided to increase their deductibles substantially. We actually looked at a situation a few months back where the owners of the property basically dropped their insurance altogether and decided to self-insure completely. And their lender, of course, the mortgage lender said, you can't do that. You have to have insurance. And their solution, fortunately, they were wealthy enough. Their solution was basically they put in a large amount of money in escrow, about $500,000 in escrow, and said, look, if we have a claim, that's how we're going to pay it. And the lender accepted it. So I think there aren't a lot of options for how to deal with that. You either pay the insurance bill or you agree to take on greater risk. We have seen some investment companies that have large portfolios also decide to essentially self-insure to a very high level, $50-60 million. And their lenders, if they're strong enough, if they have strong enough balance sheet, their lenders will accept it.
Got it. Another question from Perry Maresha. What do you foresee as the likely direction of development for towns with both interstate and rail service? And what should one strive for to benefit those towns, percent of multifamily versus percent of retail versus percent of industry manufacturing? Sorry, long question there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if I've got this right, the question is on interstate, highway, and rail access. I mean, there's no, particularly in Connecticut, there's no question that those are key drivers to your ability to build, more activity and more economic activity in your community. Connecticut has a limited number of communities that have access to that. If you look at what CMDA is doing under David Corris's leadership, there's a lot of focus on utilizing or encouraging towns to increase their transit-oriented development, and we think that's a great initiative. There is a lot of opportunity, and those are the logical places to increase density of both residential and commercial. So I think if you're a town doing an inventory of the available commercial properties and getting the message out to this community, to the brokerage community, and thereby to the development community, that you're interested in exploring options for some of those vacant properties. I think that's a very good strategy, and I think it'll be well received. A lot of fewer, but still a lot of Connecticut towns historically haven't done much in the way of marketing themselves to the investment world. The view was, if somebody wants to do something, they'll come and talk to us. But it's a very competitive world, and and B, I think there's more opportunity if the community is active in marketing, that they're looking for that kind of economic development activity. So if you've got an interstate, you've got a rail line, I mean, you're well positioned to be out there telling that story, and you just got to do it. What was the last part of the question, Brandon?
It says, and what should one strive for to benefit those towns? Oh, sorry. It says percent of multifamily versus percent of retail versus percent of industry/manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, the issue I think there is that if you're trying to increase economic activity, it really starts with attracting jobs. And if you're successful in attracting jobs, then I think the next focus is, can you provide residential opportunities for those workers? We like to say, and I'll credit Bill Ethier, a number of you might remember Bill. He was a very active guy on the Connecticut home builders, but he used to say that homes are where jobs go at night. And I thought that was a great way to capture that. So if you're a community and you're looking to increase economic activity, probably a good place to start is, can you do anything in terms of, do you have commercial property available that you could use to attract employers? And once you've got employers, you now have employees, and you have the opportunity to increase the residential component. If you're able to increase the residential component, the reality is people shop where they live. So if you've increased the residential base, people will go to a grocery store within 5 minutes if there is one. So you will attract retail and food and beverage uses if you increase your residential base. If you don't want to attract the manufacturing or industrial, and you're really after residential, I mean, that's a trickier question. If you are trying to attract residential on its own, I mean, there are a variety of ways to attract both single family and multifamily residential. The goal there should be, the driver should be the town's willingness to provide incentives or liberalized permitting that will enable a developer or investor to put their money to work quickly. The big burden, I think, the big hurdle for developing new residential in Connecticut is the permitting process. And I know Greg Bordenaro at the Hartford Business Journal, if you read his column last week, great to see him focusing on that. He's a terrific writer. He understands our business very well, and he's written some good columns on this over the years. But we need to get out as an industry and talk more about that. I know there's been a lot of discussion at the state legislature and among towns about the need for more affordable housing. That's a great discussion, but it's tied to a discussion about is local control, the degree of local control that Connecticut towns exert, is that holding back economic growth in Connecticut? And that's a good discussion. We need to be having more of that. We will have a long session coming up next year. We're just about to start the short session this year, legislative session. We'll have a long session next year. I think you're going to see continued focus on affordable housing, but that may be an opportunity for our industry and CCIM members to get out and talk to their legislators and really talk about the importance of, that the land use permitting process can be utilized to attract investment, and you can use it in such a way to attract the kind of investment you want. So if you want retail, or you want housing, you want manufacturing, you can tailor, you have some ability to tailor your land use regs to help you do that.
All right, thanks, Mike. I'm going to make these the last two questions so we stay on time. From Frank Amodio, have property owners had success with cost segregation, tax savings?
Yeah, we've seen, it's not an area that we spend a lot of time in, but yes, the quick answer is we've seen more focus on that in recent years. Utilizing accelerated depreciation for certain improvements and so on, and using cost segregation to do that. I think there are a number of companies out there that focus on helping companies with cost segregation, and I think if you're an owner of investment properties, it's worth exploring for sure.
Great. And last, we have Eric Modio, who asks, under current Connecticut economy and future outlook, how would you deploy $1 million cash?
Oh boy. Look, I think there continues to be opportunity in almost any sector, with the exception of maybe office. I think if you look at, there's still retail opportunity, certainly opportunity in food and beverage. If it's $1 million, I mean, that's a limited amount of money. I would probably be looking at trying to attract, pad users of food and beverage, new food and beverage entrance into the market. Historically, Connecticut takes about 10 years for a new concept to reach Connecticut. So let's say you're a new restaurant concept and you open your first restaurants in California or Texas or Florida, wherever it might be, and you're successful. So what do? You build out your immediate trade area in Florida or wherever it is, and then you start building out in adjacent trade areas. That evolution, if you will, means that we probably won't see that concept in Connecticut for about 10 years. They'll go to all the major metro markets around the south, and then a little farther, and so on, before they get to some of the secondary and smaller tertiary markets that we have in Connecticut. But if you are looking to invest something in Connecticut, $1 million, to use Eric's example, my advice would be get into some of these growth markets, Florida, Texas, Nashville, and so on. Look for some of these emerging food and beverage concepts, because food and beverage is hot. That's the shopping isn't as a driver. And again, I'm sort of trying to focus on the fact that it's $1 million we're talking about. But I would get out and look at some of the emerging concepts and see whether you can attract them and maybe build a location for them in Connecticut. Whether it's Mission Barbecue, we've got a couple of those in Connecticut. But then there's a whole series of new coffee shops, Dutch Brothers and Seven Brew, for example. There are a couple of chicken chains that we haven't really seen coming into Connecticut in a big way yet. First Watch, a breakfast brunch operation. There's quite a few of them out there. And, they would probably be a good fit for that level of investment.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I'll let Jen take over.
Mike, thank you. Your insight is so valuable. We are so grateful. And I go to Costco every day. I'm happily contributing to the noted retail growth. I'm going to have my husband give you a call later. I'm going to say, Mike said I'm doing everything right. But thank you. Maybe we can jump back with you in the second half of the year for a quick catch up. See how things are changing. That would be incredible. Thanks again for your time. Thank you to everyone who's joined the webinar. We're grateful for your involvement. Please visit our website at ctccim.com to see other future events that we have on the calendar, and make sure you are putting our email address in your address book so that you're not missing anything from us. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you for joining, and we'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Bye.